Senator Rosen. Senator Padilla, recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you also for your flexibility. I'm back and forth with the Judiciary Subcommittee on AI this morning as well. Now, artificial intelligence is already transforming how government agencies serve the public. Federal agencies are leveraging AI in a number of important ways, including to support disaster response and emergency management efforts, to detect financial fraud and identity theft, to offer chatbots and virtual assistants that enhance customer service and engagement, as well as for environmental monitoring and conservation. I lay this out because a lot of times we're trying to have these conversations about AI, the potential, some risks and things to keep in mind as if it's a far off into the future dynamic. No, this is a here and now conversation. But clearly there are risks that we'll need to address, especially in the sensitive context of providing government services. Automated decision-making systems and tools risk exacerbating the many existing inequities in our society, as some of the testimony today reflects. So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for calling this hearing. I look forward to hearing from our panel today on how we can ensure that fostering trustworthy, equitable, and accountable applications of AI in government can be achieved. Now, in reviewing the published inventory of AI use across the federal government, again, today, not into the future, I was pleasantly surprised to see that many agencies are building AI tools in-house. Some argue that it's more cost-effective for a government to simply purchase AI products developed by the private sector, whether it's off-the-shelf or customized. However, many of you, the testimony that we've heard today explicitly mentioned that government technologists and in-house tools are important to ensuring that they comply with the relevant regulations and have the focus of furthering an agency's mission, not always achieved when you contract out. Mr. Epping, first question. Your testimony highlighted some of the tensions that arise when government relies on proprietary private sector tools that are not always available for public scrutiny. What are some of the factors that should go into agency decisions to build a tool internally as opposed to procuring it externally?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. You're absolutely right. This is definitely a here and now problem, and we do have these frameworks that have been discussed today, but we don't have, at least that I've observed, is the on-the-ground enforcement and policing of those, and that is especially true when it comes to these in-house versus proprietary systems. This should be an easy question, I think. We can't allow proprietary interests when we're talking about government making decisions about individuals and their families to hold due process rights hostage. So to the extent that a government agency or a state-funded agency needs to use or wants to use automated decision-making, if they've gone through the process, a transparent process of deciding that that's appropriate in the first place, if there's going to be proprietary or private interests providing any of that, the price of admission is going to have to be honoring Americans' due process rights, equal protection rights, which will mean the transparency of those proprietary systems so that my clients, for instance, in Idaho, can access the information about the data, the methods, and the processes involved so they can evaluate whether they need to challenge those government decisions and challenge them and appeal them if they have to.
Thank you. For the follow-up question, I invite Dr. Parker and Professor Ho to chime in. What are some of the short-term steps Congress can take to help agencies hire and retain technical talent in this area? We heard from Senator Rosen about the field in general. I think more in the private sector, the need for some of the workforce challenges in this space, but on the government side in particular.
Thank you for that question. I think there are a number of barriers right now to having that type of expertise in government. One of the barriers, I think, is a salary barrier and an understanding of the kinds of skills and knowledge that are needed in order to fill a particular AI role. I think if the occupational series that OPM is working on were developed, it would help us to identify what those skills and roles and knowledge are that are needed for certain jobs in AI in the federal government, and that would give us more ability to reach out to people that have those kinds of skills and to train to those skills through things like boot camps. A few years ago, there was a boot camp in cybersecurity that brought in people from across the federal government who were interested in learning cybersecurity skills but did not yet have them. And so the CIOs got together and trained these people, and they now have those additional cybersecurity skills. We could do something similar in AI. The challenge is always how to scale it. So Congress could fund these kinds of boot camps so that we could use the current workforce that we have, but to provide those new skills and knowledge that's needed to participate in the AI space.
Professor, anything unique to add? Because I have an additional question on a different topic for you as well.
I'll just say quickly, it's nice to see you on this side of the coast, Senator. I'll just say quickly, the other part is to build on STEM education. I think for the longest period of time, the U.S. has just been a magnet for top scientific and technical talent. But increasingly, there are international students that are choosing to leave the country. The country of Canada, for instance, has had very specialized programs to actually attract top AI talent into the country. And that would be another mechanism really to ensure that we maintain U.S. leadership in AI.
Well, you frame it as many graduate students choosing to leave the country. In too many instances, there really is no choice, given our immigration system and need for modernization, but that may be a topic for another day. Professor Ho, I mentioned another topic I wanted to make sure to ask a question on. In the paper that you co-authored on the use of artificial intelligence in federal administrative agencies, you found that law enforcement applications were the most common use case for federal agencies that adopted AI systems. So as we talk about building trust and ensuring accountability for automated decision-making, law enforcement activity is often the area in which the public has the least amount of insight, let alone oversight. Yet it's also the area where government decision-making, including tools used to guide that decision-making, have tremendous consequences for the public, particularly for historically marginalized communities. Professor Ho, can you speak to the unique challenges of guarding against bias and ensuring accountability and equity in the use of AI by law enforcement?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And thank you for noting the report that we conducted a number of years ago. I should clarify that in that report, we looked largely at the use of AI by civil agencies, and one of the challenges has actually been exactly to get transparency into the use within the criminal justice system. That's reflected as well in some of the exemptions under, for instance, the AI Bill of Rights, or the scope of requirements to file AI use case inventories. And that's why I think these AI use case inventories are such a kind of critical tool of transparency. You can't manage what you can't measure, and so I think AI use case inventories are an important first step in that regard. Let me loop back, though, to the earlier question that you had just in terms of accountability, and give you one example of the sort of enforcement context that I think is very telling, that connects this to the necessity to have human talent within government. Within the Securities and Exchange Commission, there was an internal team that built out a series of very innovative ways to scan filings, to look at the risk, for instance, of insider trading based on what folks had filed to the SEC using natural language processing. But what was very important in that use case was that it was internally developed first, and it was the interaction between the technical engineers and the line-level prosecutors that really ensured accountability. The line-level prosecutors within the SEC said, I am not persuaded by your risk score. You need to explain to me why this system is actually identifying this case as something that I should prosecute, because ultimately I need to bring this in front of a judge. And that is exactly the reason why technical talent and the ability of technical talent to work with the domain experts is going to be so critical to have these kinds of forms of internal accountability for AI systems.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, if I could just add one last note, not another question, just one last note. tapping my prior experience as Secretary of State of California, where we introduced the first chatbot in California state government to assist people navigating our website, also automating how business owners and entrepreneurs could file their necessary paperwork with the state of California. There's at times a personnel concern that through additional automation and efficiencies that we don't need as many workers, and therefore it's a mechanism towards layoffs and staff reductions. What we were able to do instead was actually free up people's valuable time from quote-unquote pushing paper to improve customer service and dedicate that experienced frontline personnel to some of the more complex questions or troubleshooting that a lot of either individuals or customers of government sometimes have frustrations with, long wait times, et cetera. So there can indeed be that win-win. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Senator Padilla.